much, Chair, and it's a great pleasure to be here again. And I've got to say, I'm glad I'm not standing here under a Conservative government. I'm glad that shower of crap has been got rid of. But of course it doesn't end there, does it? Because we've still got to fight. History tells us that nobody gives us anything. No political government will give us anything. We've got to fight for whatever we want to achieve. That's been the case throughout history, and I'm afraid that will continue. So we are really pleased to see the New Deal for Workers. But the New Deal for Workers will mean nothing if it's not implemented in full. And that means that they've got to get rid of not just one or two pieces of anti-trade union legislation, the whole raft of Thatcher's legislation. And of course, my union, Rob and others are right, we've been under the cosh now for 30 years. This is the 30th anniversary of the POA not having the right to strike when a pernicious piece of legislation was brought in called the Criminal Justice Public Order Act, Section 127 of 1994, which made it illegal for anyone or any prison officer to induce another prison officer to take any form of industrial action. And by God, we've been dragged through the court since 1994. I think we've got enough injunctive relief papers that could paper the whole of our head office, quite frankly. But the reality is we've stood strong throughout those 30 years, and we've never repudiated any action that any of our branches have wanted to take to protect their health and safety. And going forward, I've got a message for this Labour government as well. We're not afraid of the current legislation, but even although we're now saddled with a permanent injunction under the Tories that they got in 2017 when we went out on health and safety issues. Ironically, after that, we then got a health and safety legally binding document specifically for the prison officers and related grades. So that was a small step forward. But days after that, we then got done for contempt of court for breaching the alleged permanent injunction. And for a small union, we were fined £210,000. We were also told that if we repeated the action, then they would imprison myself and the national chairman, Mark Fairhurst. Now, neither of us want to go to prison, but neither of us are actually afraid of protecting our members, and we will continue to do that. So I welcome the news that the Labour government are committed to repealing some of the anti-trade union legislation. But it needs to go further. It needs a repeal of Section 127. And that's why we're launching our campaign again at this Congress to ensure that the General Council know under Motion 3 that we're moving, that we're serious, that we want the whole trade union movement to stand behind us. We stand behind other trade unions in the repeal of the minimum staffing levels and other anti-trade union legislation, and now we want the whole of the trade union movement to stand behind us. Not just to pass Motion 3 at Congress, but to mount a concerted campaign. Because I've been here before. The POA moved in 2012 to look at a general strike, the practicalities of a general strike. And after probably one of the best debates that I've heard at Congress in decades, the motion was passed, and it was sat on, and nothing happened. Now, we all stand applauding what happens in France and Spain and Ireland when they take general strikes. And even Israel, actually, last week, Histradub, the trade union movement over there, took general strike action because of the way that things have developed in the conflict with regards to that, although it was deemed very quickly by the Israeli courts as being an illegal action. But they've still done it. But we never seem to want to do that in this country. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not in our makeup. But the reality is, we cannot stand by and watch any other union, because when all this pernicious legislation was being taken forward by the Conservative government in relation to ASLEF members and other members within the trade union movement, we were 100% behind them. And to be fair, ASLEF have always been 100% behind the POA as well. But it needs to be more than that. It needs to be a concerted campaign to make sure that we put pressure on the Labour Cabinet in order to do it. And that's why we're launching. The brochures will be on our stand at the TUC and at the Labour Party conference. And we make no apology to that. I've recently just written to the Prime Minister, sent him a copy so that he knows exactly where we're coming from. Now, we know that prisons are in a terrible state at this minute in time. That should come as no surprise to them, because our union have given the shadow cabinet, when they were in power, the people like Steve Reid, Ellie Reeves, different people, Shabana Mahmood, either they weren't listening to us about the state of our prisons and they didn't brief the Prime Minister properly. But let me tell you, all the evidence was there. And let me also say, had we had the right to strike, our prisons wouldn't be in the situation that they're in now. Because we would not have allowed that to happen. Just like back in 1993, and when the legislation was put in 1994, that dispute back then wasn't about pay, it wasn't about terms and conditions, it was about overcrowding our prisons. Back then, when the prison population was 40,000, we were locking out from the courts in certain prisons. That's how that legislation came about. Not because of a pay claim, not because of our terms and conditions or pensions or anything like that. And of course, they're very important. But because we were maintaining the health and safety for our members and indeed those in our care. And guess what? The population back then was 40,000 in prisons when they imposed this. It's now 88,000. And we've got less staff now looking after those prisoners than we had back then. So please, if you're a member of a trade union and you're a delegate at Congress, make sure your unions get up and fully support this at Congress. It's no use just having a small debate. Let's debate it thoroughly. Let's back the POA in motion 3 and indeed on motion 46 about the mentally ill in prisons. And let's move forward with a concerted campaign in order to treat decent public sector workers in the manner they should do, with a fundamental basic human right of having the right to strike. Thank you.